This episode is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Protect your health system with CrowdStrike, a global security leader. CrowdStrike has redefined modern security with the world's most advanced cloud native platform for protecting critical areas of enterprise risk, endpoints and cloud workloads, identity, and data. Powered by the CrowdStrike Security Cloud and world-class AI, the CrowdStrike Falcon platform leverages real-time indicators of attack, threat intelligence, insights on evolving adversary tradecraft, and enriched telemetry from across the enterprise to deliver hyper-accurate detections, automated protection, and remediation. All this and elite threat hunting and prioritized awareness of vulnerabilities. CrowdStrike, unified platform, one agent, complete protection. Hi, I'm Drex, a recovering healthcare CIO and longtime cyber advisor and strategist for some of the world's most innovative cybersecurity companies. Now I'm president of This Week Health's 229 Cyber Risk Community. And this is UnHack the News, a mostly plain English, mostly non-technical show covering the latest and most important security news stories. And now, this episode of UnHack the News. Cristian Rodriguez is with me. Hey, Cristian, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Drex, how you doing?
I'm good. You're at CrowdStrike. I'm positive that you've been promoted since the last time I've talked to you. What's your job title now?
Oh, I don't even look anymore.
It's like, I don't know. I just
Yeah.
show up and people introduce me and then I just kind of roll with it.
I just show up and I talk about the fun stuff. I talk about the threats, how we're innovating rather. And yeah, I mean, and I have conversations with great people like yourself. So thanks for having me.
I love it. I love it. And you've got your own podcast.
Yeah, the Adversary Universe podcast. Smash that subscribe button and we'll cover some of the stuff that we'll probably cover today as well.
It's really one of my favorite things. And it's because you and Adam, it's almost like when I watch the podcast, you are doing your best to, in a very subtle way, try to figure out how to aggravate Adam a little bit. And it's especially around things, we're going to talk about one of these today, voice phishing.
Yes.
So I noticed that he has a thing about vishing as a word.
Yeah, he can't say it. I feel like if he says it 3 times, he'll like explode or something. Right? He's very angry with the culmination of these 2 words of voice and phishing. But yeah, that's an interesting topic. It's coming up. Every event that I've been to, every conversation I've had has kind of circled around this topic, right?
A massive increase. I mean, I talked about it on the 2-minute drill today. Yeah. The show will air probably a week after that, but cool. Just the reality of, like, you look at the list of companies who have been busted in the voice phishing, getting into the CRM, taking all the data. You guys talk about a global threat report too. Like, tell me more about what's going on there.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually just recorded an episode this week on this topic, specifically Scattered Spider, but more importantly, kind of the evolution of how attackers went from this very aggressive slew of campaigns that were very much focused on like malware and like exploits. And I think the exploits are still very much relevant, but malware use as an entry point, as an initial access vector, if you will, has been significantly reduced, and the identities have been kind of just this ocean, if you will, of availability, right? Right, that these attackers are kind of fishing for.
I just got my Aeon's Life letter, notice of data security, which is so more credit monitoring for me.
Yeah. I have some very controversial opinions on this, by the way. I don't know if they would necessarily be CrowdStrike sanctioned, but I have an idea of like where the consumer space anyway is going to end up one day when it comes to your PII being out there exposed, right? I mean, again, this is very against the grain, but I think at some point, based upon all of the breaches and all of our personal information being out there, I think at one point it won't even matter as a consumer, right? I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a major shift in the responsibility being brought into the banks, right? Whoever is basically authorizing the opening of credit or authorizing certain transactions, I think we'll get to the point where banks and financial institutions and credit companies are going to have multi-layer authentication and approval processes built into the way that you buy and the way that you transact online, to the point where if your information was stolen, the act of creating new credit is going to be very difficult, right? So I think long term, that's where we're going to go, where I don't want to say you shouldn't care if personal information is out there, but at some point, I think the grand scheme of things, it's probably out there. Like all of our information is out there in some capacity, right? So, I mean, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think that's what's going to happen, right? At some point.
This voice phishing phenomenon, what can organizations do to try to keep
for those
being sucked into that?
Yeah, for those not familiar with it, right? So imagine someone calling up your help desk under the guise of an employee under duress, and they're asking you to reset passwords, and your traditional help desk analyst is trying to help, as their title implies, and they want to close out that ticket as quickly as possible. So they're going to try to walk through some basic questions to verify your identity, right? Like who's your supervisor and your department and like your phone number. And these are very antiquated business practices, right? Where putting that employee or that person on the other line through a series of harder questions or validations is something that I think most organizations need to improve on. So, for example, getting that person on video, right? Or asking that person to show some authentication in the form of IDs or passports.
Like on
Or
camera, hold their,
yeah, exactly,
okay.
exactly. Like get on camera, right? And I know we can talk about AI and deepfake, but I think there's other ways to make sure that the person is who they say they are, and then maybe even adding like a third party, like a tertiary validation process, like a coworker or like a supervisor, right?
Mhm.
Someone that can also co-validate and then say, yes, this is a real request, and you can move on to the next stage of resetting that password or resetting MFA. Because it's very easy, right? It's very easy for these adversaries. They've been extremely successful. Their success, which they brag about in their various forums and comms, their success, it's proliferating through other e-crime groups that are scratching their heads saying, oh, I don't have to try that hard. I can just pick up the phone and dial for dollars, if you will, right? And
There's a
so
lot of
it's just very
copycat in
easy.
this. When
A
somebody,
lot of
when one of the
copycats.
groups is
Yeah,
successful, then the next group and the next group, they're like, yeah, we can do that.
exactly correct. Exactly correct. Right. So it's easy for them based upon what we've seen historically. And as a result, other groups are copying that and they're picking up the phones, right? And they're calling in.
Yeah. Wow. I want to talk about another story too. All this stuff that's going on with North Korean fake employees who are now working for US based companies. And I've heard the stories from chief information security officers and healthcare organizations and healthcare partners too, where they've had this same stuff happen to them. You talk about
Mm.
that in the global threat report, but it's in the news all over the place.
It
Tell me
is.
more
Yeah.
about that story.
Yeah, so basically a group that we've given the moniker of famous Chalima, right, which is basically an extension of North Korean intelligence. They have been embedding agents in Western enterprises for a few years now, where they have these agents go through a variety of job applications, they go through interview processes, and they actually get hired by companies like software companies, very big reputable names that hire these folks
Yeah.
into like their development program. And now these agents that are working in this development program through basically a middleman who, sets up like a laptop farm and allows that agent in North Korea to install like remote management tools on that system. And these laptop farm operators have dozens of machines, if not hundreds of machines, in a room in their house, and they're all connected to this specific KVM with these remote management tools, allowing these adversaries to come in and actually do development for these companies. And they're kind of broken out into two categories. One category of someone just developing, so a North
Like
Korean agent
literally just doing
developing.
the work
They're doing their work, and
and
then the
getting paid.
salaries are going into the weapons program, right? For
Yeah.
example. And
Right.
then there's other groups that are embedding malware and they're looking for sensitive data, right, based upon what their access ultimately entails. And there are over 300 organizations that we've identified that had this issue. And I was at an event a couple months ago on stage with a CISO, and he mentioned, he's like, hey, we were impacted by this. We had an actual agent in our DevOps team that was attributed to this North Korean actor in this nexus. And it's kind of wild, right, to see that it's proliferated for quite some time. And there's a lot of money that went into the weapons program, right, and
Yeah.
by Mr. Kim Jong-un. So it's definitely not slowing down. They've been using AI for like deep fake interviews. They've been using AI to build up these fake personas online on websites like LinkedIn or any type of professional hiring site. They've used AI to build resumes. They use AI to get through interview processes. We have tons of video that actually shows what that interview process is and how they respond to questions when it
Mm.
comes to even asking that person to come in person, right? To maybe grab their laptop and they're just some of the excuses are, oh, I'm visiting a family member or if someone's out sick or someone's in hospital, I can't make it. Can you ship my laptop to somewhere else? And it's effective and it's worked in the past.
Yeah. And people are, I think sometimes too, HR folks or hiring managers feel super lucky to find this person at a great price who mostly wants to talk about salary and doesn't want to talk a lot about benefits.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
they're ready to go. It seems like you got a sweet deal. We got to hire this person
Yeah.
before they get an offer
Exactly.
from somebody else. And so
Yeah.
that sense of urgency is all part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they'll answer questions and they'll answer pretty effectively programming or skills. And to your point, yeah, sometimes the HR manager or hiring manager sees that person and says, "Oh, we have a winner, right? Let's get this role filled quickly." And
Let's
they
get
want to
it
move on to the
done.
next one, right?
Yeah, and because a lot of times too, these roles are open for a long time too,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
they're in a hurry to knock
Yeah,
them
it's
down.
interesting now that I'm saying this out loud. There's an interesting correlation between the help desk objective and the hiring manager's objective, right? To say like, "Hey, I just want to get this through the process and on to the next thing,"
Yeah.
right? And I think there's an urgency issue that I think we need to address in the grand scheme of like security enablement for HR and help desk to say, listen, these are things you need to be cognizant of.
On both
And
sides of it, right?
yes,
There's the applicants creating a sense of urgency.
yeah,
In HR, it's actually maybe the hiring manager who's creating a sense of urgency. So they're
exactly.
maybe overlooking a couple of things to hurry up and get this done.
Exactly
The help
correct.
desk
Yeah.
is doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, look at my queue. There's 60 calls in the queue. I need to
Exactly.
just get past this person." That's great
Yeah.
insight,
Yeah.
actually. I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about that. Two
Yeah.
sides of the same coin.
I know. I just thought about that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They're both a play on urgency. So
You
yeah.
can put that in your next
Yeah,
presentation.
I'll put it in your next episode. I'll do that totally.
I want to ask you too, one of the stories or one of the things we talk about regularly, but I just think we can't talk enough about it.
Yeah.
There was a story in the Nightly from Australia, and it was about Conti and all of the messages that got leaked, but more and more insight on how bad guys really operate, like startup companies who have a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
they have CEOs and CFOs, and I mean, you see this kind of stuff all the time. How do they look and how do they operate?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's an organizational structure behind a lot of these groups. They operate like a full business, to your point. And naturally, depending on whether they're kind of standalone e-crime groups versus nation state sponsored, a lot of times what we're seeing on the nation state side is that they're almost like defense contractors that are working with, for example, like the Chinese government, right? And they're building intelligence tools. And with some of the leaks that took place not long ago with a couple of those organizations, the chat logs were leaked. You saw them communicating sentiment around like salary issues, right? Not getting paid enough or not having equity in a stake of these smaller defense contractors,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting, right? That they're building these offensive tools, if you will, and they are trying to make money, right? So that's on the nation state side. On the e-crime side, you have this ecosystem of, I don't want to call it like a pyramid, but you think of groups that are designing ransomware and they're selling the ransomware as a service versus groups that are more focused on selling identities, right? And then there are like these lower tier groups that don't necessarily have the technical aptitude to build these tools from scratch, but they'll subscribe to these services because it's a lot easier to just use what's out there and use what is being innovated on, right? So if you
So
subscribe
they
to this ransomware
subcontract.
service,
They subcontract to somebody who's
exactly
actually really
contracts
good, and they're focused on this little niche
exactly
of,
correct.
yeah.
Exactly correct. And your goal once you spend the money is to just find your targets, right? And then hopefully infiltrate them and run your double extortion programs or run your ransomware and then use AI, right, to profile your victims and use AI to do things like even spam bombing, right? We've seen that with a group called Curly Spider where we're talking about phishing or attacks that are a little more on the social engineering side. We've seen groups that will find victims and just spam them, right? Sign them up for all these newsletters or things that like interest them, but they're just getting spam and their inbox is being flooded. And then they're calling up that victim under the guise of someone from the help desk. So that's kind of the inverse of what we mentioned earlier, right? Saying, hey, are you getting a bunch of spam? And that person is saying, yes, I am. Like, can you fix this? And you go, yeah, you know what? I can. Do you mind just downloading this remote management tool? Let me get on your system and start to fix things and rectify it. And then that is ultimately their path into that system. And then they wreak their havoc and jump credentials and move laterally. And so it's interesting again that a lot of these adversaries have reverted to the Kevin Mitnick style of an intrusion, right? By targeting the human side of the house in a much more personal way. And it's been very successful for them.
I was talking to somebody yesterday about how sometimes this personalized medicine approach to hacking, right? The like, because I know so much about you now, I can find so much out about you online.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes it really easy for me to create the story that's going to get you to keep your alarm bells silent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. No, man, my machine is totally messed up. And yeah, I would
Exactly.
love your help.
Yeah.
It looks
exactly.
like the right phone number from the help desk. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating that the psychology behind these attacks are a major focal point for these adversaries now, right?
They're almost like magicians in some ways.
Yeah. They're,
Like,
yeah,
look over
exactly.
here, look over here, and don't pay
Sleight of
attention to
hand.
what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, you're right. You're right. If you can target, I mean, now AI has even, it's accelerated that experience, right? Of targeting someone getting a profile on them, understanding what their likes are, their interests are. And then from there, creating a campaign that is fairly fluid, right? And then on to the next one.
And the more they do, the more they learn, the more they figure out what'll
Yeah.
work on the next victim.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
the copycats pile on. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to ask you about one more story because I thought it was
Sure.
pretty interesting. There's a ransomware gang that's using an AI chat bot to negotiate their deals. Have you guys heard of this and seen it, and how much of it is out there? What should we
Yeah,
read
it's
about
just,
it?
I mean, it's just lazy, but anyway, I mean, everyone's using chatbots now, right? They're not even asking for their money personally anymore. I think, yeah, so I think it's just part of what we've seen with technical operations being kind of augmented with AI, right? And that's where a lot of these groups they're getting into there's targeted campaigns where there'll be a very big focus, very aggressive targeting of high worth individuals, if you will, within an organization. And then there's groups that will say, look, the more we can automate, the better, right? And if we can set up a bot that communicates on our behalf, then that bot has the ability of
Just
speaking
blast
on behalf of
everyone.
speaking of think about this. If the bot is chatting on your behalf, then attributing your conversation, right? If you're on a forum, you think of the way that intel collection is done. If you're on a forum and you're monitoring adversaries and the way that they communicate, right? And that same communication style is used in actual negotiations, right? There's so much that goes into this. I'm really simplifying this now. But I could say, hey, that's this person. We've been tracking them. They may be part of this campaign. Language, you name it, right? And we have linguists that will analyze this type of activity.
Yeah.
But when you start to implement a chatbot that just starts communicating on your behalf, right? Then you're giving the chatbot instructions that says, you're going to ask for this, you're going to negotiate. This is your floor cost, for example, and it can do a lot for you. And it's just up and running. And so now you've basically put another layer in between you as an adversary and your victims, maybe even several layers, to kind of walk through things like payment systems and negotiations and whatever the case may be.
And it becomes even harder to do attribution then.
Yeah, at some point it does, right? Now there's plenty of ways to go beyond analysis of like, what is the bot? Where is it being spun up? Where's it being hosted? I mean, there's so many other things that you can do. But, the days of the negotiations where there's like a message, for example, that just pops up and says, call this number, right? And make a payment and you're talking to someone. I think we will see that probably fade away as AI starts to take the role of that persona, if you will. Right?
That's amazing. I love talking to you. It's
likewise.
A good time. I really appreciate you being on UnHack today. Cristian Rodriguez from CrowdStrike. Thanks.
You got it. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to UnHack the News. And while this show keeps you updated on the biggest stories, we also try to provide some context and even opinions on the latest developments. And now there's another way for you to stay ahead. Subscribe to our daily insights email. What you'll get is expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox, ensuring you never miss a beat. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. I'm your host, Drex DeFord. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And that's it for UnHack the News. As always, stay a little paranoid, and I'll see you around campus.